So the first question I have for Dr. Toby is, a lot of what you taught and those action points, a lot of them had to do with the past. So my question for you, from a relationship perspective, how much should you disclose to the other person about your past? And Ms. Aoshika, if you want to wade into this as well, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But, you talked about giving them grace, understanding, giving yourself grace, and knowing that you're a sum of everything that has happened to you. But, where do you kind of draw the line?
Hello? When you say draw the line, just for clarity, in terms of how much you disclose, or how much you rely on your past and how it influences
how much you disclose to the other person. So let's take the context of a potential marriage or a romantic relationship. We know trust is the currency of relationships. Should you disclose every single thing about what happened to you, what happened in childhood, your trauma, all of that, your past relationships?
Yeah. So, there is such a thing as over-disclosing, right? One of the things that we often say is when you meet someone, you have to, for lack of a better word, test what they do with the information that you give them. So when you meet someone, you start out dating, you do the surface things first, what you do, what's your work, But the way we are as human beings, even when we try to hide things about ourselves that we think are imperfections or flaws, the way that the mind works is that unconsciously they would start slipping out little by little. Initially, he might come a bit late and you're like, and they're like, it's okay, So you cannot completely hide who you are. Your mind does not have the capacity to do that. It would always slip out little by little. But what we often say is, as you start developing a relationship and there's trust there, start sharing a little and see what that person does with the information you give them. But also, something else that we have to understand is, just the way that we learn how to love by how we were loved, it's very normal, and people don't really ascribe to this because they don't believe that love should be mechanical, but it's very normal that you teach people how to love you. So it's okay to say, I'm about to share something with you that's a bit sensitive, and this is the response I would like from you. Especially if when you have tried it in the past, you haven't quite liked the response. So a good example is a bit of a stereotypical one, but it's one that people are quite aware of. A woman comes home, she's venting. This happened, this da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the man is like, maybe she needs my help. And he says, why didn't you do this instead? And then she snaps. I'm not telling you because I want you to fix it. I'm telling you because I need to share my day with you. I just want you to listen. Yeah? So it's okay to teach people how to take the information that you're giving them in terms of vulnerability, but test things out. If you give a little and you like the way they respond, then you give a bit more, you give a bit more.
Okay, thank you. That's also a function of time, I guess. You need time. Mrs. Aoshika, please.
The only thing I will add to what Toby has said is, look, some things are critical and must be disclosed. I have a child before. In fact, you should disclose it on day one. And someone you say, I love you. I say, yeah, that's true. But, I'm usually busy because I have to take care of my daughter. You find a way to put it on the table. The one that will not stay, you won't get a phone call the next day. Good riddance to bad rubbish. So you must decide the things that are concrete in your life, that are non-negotiable, and you put them on the table. But obviously, you must understand the wisdom. But there are things that will come with time. You cannot meet someone today and say, I need to tell you my entire life history. It's not possible. It will come natural, which is what courtship is about. So over the period of courtship, different parts of your life will be revealed. Things will lead to you that you say, as a matter of fact, this is this. Or you go out, you meet someone, and you go later you can say to the person, I actually know that person before, and this is how. This is what happened and all of that. You have to, because you do not want to get embarrassed. But you must pace yourself. But there's some things that you put on the table. There's no story. You don't go and say, you know what my bank balance is? I beg. I earn this much. You don't know what will happen. We had a live series last Saturday for men only. One guy asked me some amazing question there. And he said, please, can you tell me how to love women that are tall? He's not talking about height. was talking about women who are ambitious, well-driven, and are richer than a lot of guys now. That guys are challenged. They don't know how to. He said, what else can you put on the table that will compensate for the fact that you don't have as much money as the girl, that allows you to still be able to love her? This was a concrete conversation because it's a real issue right now. So, and it's about girls also understanding that it's not about how tall a guy is financially. It's about the man that he is. And what kind of conversations do you have? Are you going to ask him on day one, how much is your salary? No. But you're going to see how he behaves. If the guy takes you out and is waiting for you to pay the bills, then you know this one came to spend your money. He's a sponge. So you go off. You know, those kind of things, yes.
Okay, so, and I guess the reason I asked that question is because I know women have been so traumatized by relationship, they almost want to get out, they want to get out of the way so that they feel like they're not wasting their time. Dr. Toby, so there's another issue which we don't often talk about. You discover that a lot of relationships end up where people have had historic emotional or even mental health challenges. These don't have to do with finance, whether you had a child before. Some issues that you may not even discover until you're married, even after dating and courting for 3 years. And often in Christendom, it's, there's a lot of prayer and spirituality that goes with these things. But how do you even coach and begin to advise, say, a woman who, for instance, discovers that her husband has had some deep-seated emotional or mental health challenges? And with pride and men and egos, it can be a very fine line.
Just quickly, go and see a therapist. Go do couples counseling. And the reason why I'm saying that is because a lot of times we have the expectation that our partners should be our be-all. They should be our therapists. They should be the parents of our children. They should be able to be great in sex. They should do everything. But that's not possible, because nobody has all the skills. So if you find that your partner has deep-seated traumatic issues, emotional issues that they're dealing with, that is getting in the way that you flow in a relationship, I know it's not the norm, but seek help. You might not be able to go to a therapist. You might have somebody in church that's trained counselor. Seek help. And the reason why is because you need someone that is objective, that can ask the questions that when they ask it, wouldn't bring up the defenses of your partner. When you ask it, it's seen as an attack, and so automatically they go into defense mode. When you're defensive, you cannot be vulnerable. So you need someone that is objective, that doesn't have any stakes in you or him, that can help these situations come out and help both of you work through that. So go see someone, a therapist, but if a therapist is not available, go see a pastoral counselor or your pastor or someone that can be objective. And I'm sticking to this because a lot of times people advise you on their experience if they're not trained, and their experience might not be your experience. So you need to find someone that is trained and can be objective.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Owishika, there's a question I want to ask you about the relationship between daughters and their fathers and how that ultimately influences how women approach their relationships and the energy they also give up to their spouses or future spouses. If you're a woman who grew up without a dad and you're really struggling to kind of connote the idea of a man loving you, where do you even begin? And how have you seen it manifest, maybe in the lives of people that you've counseled or you've advised or experiences around you?
Okay, so the tendency is girls that haven't had the security of a father's love don't trust people. They don't tend to trust men. Because it means if they don't have that security, they've had another kind of experience. And that experience manifests itself in different ways. And unconsciously sometimes, and this is Toby's field, they're looking for the kind of relationship they grew up in. If it's a good father, girls are looking for their fathers in their husbands. If it's a bad father, in fact, I listened to a girl in the last 1 week. And what did she say? That the guy that she was going out with loved her so much that she used to think something was wrong with him because the only way she understood love was abuse. And therefore, if he was acting, she didn't trust the genuineness of his love, because the only way she understood love between a man and a woman was through an abusive relationship. And we tend not to understand the subconscious nurturing that we get, from even the wrong relationship. So how can we help people like that? First and foremost, a lot of patience. When a woman like that, if she finds love, it would be a man who loves her enough to stand with her, to help her until she gets to the place of trust. And you will also know that it would be a traumatic relationship because you will keep having to respond to her insecurities or her fears. But I have watched men who love enough to stand with the woman through those seasons until she gets to a place of trust. And this is where churches are powerful, because it's an emotional hurt and a wound. And it can really largely get healed by nurturing and prayers. And when that happens, and a lot of patience, because it doesn't happen overnight. When that happens over time and there's support, you will find the husband is protective of that woman even from his own family, despite her tendencies. But if you understand the foundation of somebody's problem, you can make room for it and see where they're coming from and then support them through. It takes God and it takes a support system. And that support system is either from home or from relationship, friends, and family. But it's a long journey.
Yeah, indeed. And I think part of it, a round of applause for her. And just listening to you, I think part of it is actually being able to have that conversation with your prospective partner up front. Because that could be an area of receiving love that you struggle with. Now, there's an aspect of relationships we haven't really focused on, which is other female relationships. Because this is love and relationships, how we love. It also manifests and shows up in our sisters, in the way we approach our female relationships. To what extent is our emotional well-being as women also really dependent on how we love our shown love by our sisters? I just want you to share a bit of light on that dynamic, how it actually influences people in their choices.
Auntie spoke to this already, but that love is the core. The way that your emotional health influences the way that you see the world, the way that you navigate, the way that you form bonds, the way you respond to conflicts when it shows up, even in your sisterhood or your friends or your siblings. It navigates everything about your meaning-making process. So if there's that kind of emotional unwellness or difficulty, it will definitely sip through those friendships. But talking about friendships, I'm glad you brought this up. The friends you have around you are so important. Because what tends to happen is when you're in a unit with someone and things happen, you seek out those friends to validate your perspective or to give you a different perspective than the one that you have. And for most of us, when we are fighting with our partners, and we do this unconsciously, but they become the enemy. They're not supposed to be, but they become the enemy. So we don't trust their perspective anymore. So we go outside of our romantic relationship to get a different perspective. Now, if your friends are there telling you, he did this, leave him. If your friends cannot tell you the truth, a good sign, if you're always right when you talk to your friend about issues you're married, run from that friend. Because you can never always be right. It's impossible. So the friendships that you have around you are so important. Having people that you can be vulnerable with, that can also be vulnerable with you. And one of the practices that we talked about today about opening up about your imperfection and can tell you sensitively when you are wrong. Not as a way to gloat, hey, you that always do Mrs. Good News, now you're wrong. But as a way to steer you in the right direction is so important. So your friendships, your sisterhood, it's key. And the way that you love as well is key, because in that love relationship, you have to be able to be open, to be vulnerable with each other.
Thank you. Mrs. Awashika, please.
Okay, so what I want to add, just taking from where she stopped, is this. And I'll give you a practical guide. At this point in your life, let's draw the line. Do an evaluation. I always say, audit your friends. Audit the people you call your friends. Determine who they are to you. what value they bring to the table, what they represent, what kind of voices do they represent in your life. Why is that important? That you audit your friends before the moment that you need them. If you haven't audited your friends and identified their perspective, their position, their values, the things they consider important, when you have a problem, you will take the wrong problem to the wrong friend. And they'll give you the wrong counsel that will lead you into trouble. I'm not saying don't keep your primary school, your secondary school, whatever level of friends you have. But don't be blind to who each person is. A girl that's a runs girl might still be your friend for whatever reason. However, you know that there are things you can't discuss with her. A woman who does not have respect for her husband and doesn't respect men generally, she's money and everything about, is not the one you're going to talk to about your husband. Because the counsel she will give you is not the right one. The one that doesn't believe in God, but she's your friend from past, is not the one you're talking about your spiritual challenge. Why? She has no capacity to walk you through and encourage you and support you through. Your friend who hasn't stayed in a job sustainably for some time is not the one you take your career challenges to. Your friend that doesn't mind sleeping with a man to make money is not the one you go and tell that my boss wants to sleep with me, even though he has promised me promotion. She will encourage you. Why? Because for her, it's nothing. So audit your friends. Determine who they are. Determine what they bring to the table. Determine how they will play in your life. What you will go to them for, what you will never go to them for. So that when you get into a situation where you are incapacitated, you're not confused as to what voices you have given the power to influence your life. It would help you because in that moment, you're going to depend on your friends. But the kind of friends you have and who they are and the situation at hand will determine what you get out of that situation. It's not what you do on the spot. It's what you do in advance. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well said. Round of applause for them. I'm conscious of time, so I want us to now take questions for the floor. And I would say because Mrs. Aoshika needs to leave almost immediately, if we can direct maybe the first couple of questions for her, and then we can move. I think the usher, okay, thank you very much. We already have questions here. Wow, okay. Okay, so maybe I'll direct the first question to you, ma'am. This is a question from somebody online. Thanks for the great wisdom. The question is, how does this apply to those who have made a mistake in marriage and divorce because we know we chose the wrong spouse based on adultery and abandonment? Are we permitted another chance, and can we still apply the same principles for a new relationship? Well, this is a combination of a doctrinal issue and, so Mrs. Aoshika.
If you're already divorced, you're divorced. There's nothing anybody, except if you want to remarry yourselves. But that's a different scenario. However, one of the wisdom of life is we learn from our mistakes and from our past. So what are your learnings from there? Everything we've said today is applicable to how you move forward. It's about how you now think of your life. It's about making sure that you don't repeat. You can make a mistake once, but if you make it twice, you're a fool. So you need to judge that situation, be wiser, be more patient, be more gentle with making choices, and also have a wider perspective as to how you decide who you are. So I think, yes, it does work, no matter what relationship.
Okay, thank you. And I have to say, I'm a living witness that your life, you can start all over again. Those who know my story, but that's a discussion for another day. This question is for those of us already married, seeing that we are discussing love and relationship. I'm in a marriage where I'm the breadwinner. My husband used to be in the working class, but due to certain circumstances, the bread bringing is now on my table. I am the sole financial provider. He's a loving husband and is not threatened by my success or that I provide for the house. But I still struggle on how to handle the relationship such that I don't make him feel I am high-handed or critical. Kindly advise on how I can manage his emotions and still remain my true self without making him feel I'm looking down on him.
Okay. So there's a lot, in this kind of situation, there's a lot to do with historical, which means how have you always behaved in that house, in that situation before the switch of the situation. Because what he will be looking for is a difference. If he was the provider before, and there's a way you carried him, and now that he's not, if you change the way you behave, yes, you make him sensitive about it. Because let me tell you, the most critical thing about a man is what? What does he want? Respect. A man wants to be respected. So, and respecting a man, and we're talking biblically, the order in a home makes the man the head of the home. The balance sheet or the balance in your bank account does not affect the order. Let's be clear. Which is why you have to choose the husband right. So whether you have more money or you don't, the head of the home is still the head of the home. And if you have more money, then what becomes critical? Attitude. Is how you then handle the situation of having more. You know, you might want to give your husband, you know he needs money, he doesn't have money. Don't wait for him to come and beg you or ask you for it. You can just put money beside the bedside table and he knows the money is there for him. You have shown him honor and respect. You can move money to his account without saying one word because you know you want him to have the liberty to do things. If you're the one paying your children's school fees and he used to pay, you don't pay. Give him the money, let him pay. Why? You're trying to maintain the order in your house and maintain his respect with his children. If there's a time to honor him more than at any time, is in that season. Why? Because he's not just vulnerable to you, he's vulnerable to people outside that are looking inside, who are looking for excuses to tell him, your wife has spoke to you like that just because you don't have money. In-laws, neighbors, his friends. He's dealing with that as well. So you need to help your husband to help yourself by creating an environment where he's confident, he's comfortable, he's respected. Even if he upsets you, that normally you would respond to. In that season, please don't. You know what? If you're upset with your husband, I have a rule. I will never speak if there's a third party there. If my husband upsets me, a third person is not going to be there. I will walk away. I can go to the toilet and bury my voice. I can even scream in the toilet. It's nobody's business. When it's just the two of us, even if you disrespect the man, nobody knows. It's between you. Because how do people feel embarrassed about disrespect? It's because of how you make other people see them. So when you are in that situation of financial, it's delicate. It's also why you must be careful when you want to marry a guy that you know naturally you're going to be financially stronger than. You have to be sure the man is strong enough in his character and in his nature to handle it. Sometimes it's not the woman. Sometimes it's the man and his inability to handle the fact that you have that independence and he reacts. So a lot of care, a lot of attention, a lot of respect, a lot of playing to win. Because you know what is your game. You want to keep peace in your home. What is your game? You want your husband to be comfortable and not feel. So help him through that season. And it's okay. Whatever happens. The way I look at money, don't ever make money rule in your home. Make it a tool in your home. And how do you make it a tool? It serves your purpose. It doesn't matter whether it comes from A or B. Because the Bible says 1 + 1 is what? Is 1. God can choose to give money through any hand to test the heart of each of you. But if the man is responsible, you know when he had, he put. So if he doesn't have now, maybe for better. So if it's you that loses your job, would you expect your husband not to be able to support you? So it's the same. You have to give the same. We keep saying his money is our money and my money is what? That's not biblical. It's not. It's old women's tale. It's a cultural perspective that women have and is some kind of women. So just think about that and remove that problem from your home.
Thank you, Ma. Awesome, awesome. And I guess I would also add that, you know, the unsolicited financial support you do provide in difficult seasons, you also have to know the type of man
yes.
that you're with. Because sending an alert, some men could react to it and say, are you trying to say, you know, so you also have to study the character of the person that you're with. Awesome stuff. Toby, there's a question that Mr. Oshika, I know you have to leave. Yes, yes, you're free to leave. Thank you. I know she has to be somewhere by 1:30. Yeah. Thank you.
I apologize. It's really my fault. I mixed up my diary and I've been running a program since 9 o'clock in the morning that finishes at 7. So I flew from VIA, and I'm flying right back to continue and finish. Forgive me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. We're grateful. Thank you, Ma. So, Toby, let's continue with you. I have a question here from someone who says, how do you really deal with scars from childhood memories in your adult life and relationships?
The simple answer is just self-awareness. We just have to be aware of ourselves. That's really what it boils down to, the way that you act in situations, being curious about things. Why did I do that the way I did? And also to have people around you that you can trust, because one thing we say about therapy, which is true for any situation or any relationship that we have, is that a therapist is not wiser than you. It's just you're on two mountains. You're on one mountain and they're on another mountain. So they can see your mountain better than you can because you're standing on the mountain. So that's why they can say, oh, have you thought about this or have you tried this? So it's the same for friendships. It's the same for your support system. So it's important that you have people around you as well that you can be open to, that can see things and say, hey, I noticed you did this or you did that. What's going on here? So being curious, being aware of yourself, being open to feedback about things. And obviously, with psychologists, so therapy, if you can, will always be a way to deal with
Indeed.
Emotional scars.
Go ahead and plug those services.
No,
but there's a follow-up question I had, Sometimes you are not aware that you had scars. So you're going through certain things. You're not aware that somebody abused you. Things may have happened when you were 1 or 2, right? And some of these things are spiritual, so they have a long-lasting impact. So if you start to recognize patterns, it may not even be in marriage, it may be in your female relationships. You often hear people say, it could have been something that happened in your childhood. It could have been something. Can therapy actually transport you back? You hear those stories that maybe you suddenly remember a memory that was locked away. Can you get that kind of breakthrough in therapy if you didn't know that you even had scars to begin with?
Yes, because even though you might not be aware that you have scars, what we know is that you start recognizing things because of the conflicts you encounter in your life. When you start hitting brick walls in your life, you're trying to do things, but things are just not happening the way you want, or you notice there are repetitive patterns happening time and time again. That is really what gets people to stop and to reflect on what's going on. Otherwise, they don't have to. And that's because as human beings, one of the skills that we all have, because it's instinctual, is survival skills. We've all learned to survive. And so we don't stop to think about, is my survival working for me or not, until you hit a brick wall. And then all the things that you have done all the time just stop working. And so that's what therapy can come into. And it goes back to what I said to you when I was talking, which is, with therapy, we don't ask, why are you doing this? We ask, what has happened to you that has led to that? And when you start asking those kind of questions, the way that our minds are is like one memory triggers another, triggers another, triggers another, triggers another. And before you know it, you're opening up about things that you didn't even really know that you could remember. And one exercise we always do sometimes, we won't do it with patients, but it's one that can really buttress this point, is if you make a statement and I keep asking you, but why, but why, but why, you're forced to think and reflect, but why? Because we all have these rules. Some of you say, I'm just a morning person. Don't talk to me in the evening. I'm just not, or this is the way I do my things, or once you cheat on me, it's a wrap. I will never forgive you. But why? Once you start asking those kind of questions, you get to the core of the memory of why. And it might be because I saw my parents go through that. And I did not like the way my mother didn't stand up for herself. So, but why is often a way that if you start peeling down the layers, and that's what therapy does, but obviously in a bit more skillful way, that can bring up those memories that we may not even recognize are scars.
Random question, do things like hypnosis work? And is that even to be found amongst Christians, just randomly?
As a psychologist, hypnosis is not an evidence-based approach, but people find solace in doing that. But as a Christian, I would not recommend that. Even as a psychologist, I would not recommend that, depending on what you're coming to meet me for.
Thank you, great stuff. There's a question here around a different type of relationship, mother-child. How do you love a mother who has decided to treat you as a nobody? I mean, it's a continuous act from her, but I do my best to be something. It seems I am growing hated for her. I'm not sure what that word is, but clearly, hatred, yeah, she's growing hatred for her. So this is in the context of her relationship with her mother.
I mean, first of all, that sounds like a very tough relationship. And I think Auntie said this, we're all taught to honor our parents, and we don't choose that relationship, but we have to make it work in some ways, and that can be very difficult. I think one of the most important thing about that is that you can have honor, but limit the expectations that you have in terms of what your mother might be capable to do. Especially when I don't know how old this person is, but especially as you grow older, our parents are growing older, so they become a lot more set in their ways. It's not an excuse, but trying to get your mother to love you in a way that you think you're going to be loved can often lead to disappointment. So you can still show honor, but limit that expectation that love will be given to you in a particular way or a way that you want it to be. I'm not sure if I heard in the question that there is abuse.
Sort of emotional or maybe even verbal abuse, because it says decided to treat you as a nobody.
Yeah.
So we're not sure what that exactly means,
Yeah.
but it could be emotional, verbal, it could be just rejection or abandonment. Yeah.
And I'm about to say something which there needs to be distance. You have to have distance in that relationship. And that's because if you don't have distance, what's going to happen is that you're continuously putting yourself in a position to be pushed down, your self-esteem, your worth. And remember what we said, your parents are the ones that lead to the template that you have. And so this will then begin to show up in different relationships. So it's important that you have that distance, limit the expectation, but still find ways to honor. And honor can be in your behavior, things that you do.
Absolutely. I've even discovered sometimes our parents, maybe even not this extreme, sometimes we have to love them from a distance, especially if we get triggered by certain things. It's actually really for our own good. The question here is, in a situation where betrayal broke the relationship, you've forgiven, but you decide to move on, is this okay? Now, the person doesn't say whether it's a marriage or it's dating or courtship, but can you please respond to that?
There's no one-size rule to that, and that's the truth. It's a relationship by relationship basis. And so one of the things, I'm smiling because I really love this lady called Esther Perel. So anytime I have an opportunity to quote her, I get happy. But one of the things that she says is that in our lifetime, we're going to have multiple relationships. The question is, do you have it with the same person or different people? So we all have to decide, based on the relationship that we have, if we're willing to do the work with that particular person. And doing the work might be coming back from a betrayal or mistrust or cheating. But both people are changed because of that, and as a result, the dynamics of the relationship will have to change. So you're not the same people that you were before the betrayal. But for some other people, they cannot have the same relationship with that person, and so they have to break it away. So there is no one-size-fits-all answer to that. It is context by context, given what has happened in that relationship.
So there's a question here around somebody whose motherhood was insulted. For those who are mothers, I have to say this can be a very sensitive issue, because mothers sometimes are insecure. You question yourself, you question your mothering style. You question a lot, mom guilt. We don't know the context of this, but this person says, how do you forgive someone that insulted your motherhood? This same person finds it very easy to disrespect me. I can't avoid this person. She's family. Maybe it goes back to boundaries, right?
It definitely goes back to boundaries. And even the way that the question is written, insulted my motherhood. You can see that one was a tough one. That one really hit deep. And like we're saying, the interesting thing about that is that the person has said it and the person probably doesn't even remember. The person has gone on. They've said the thing, they dropped it and they've gone. But you're there, you're like holding it. You're like, this person insulted my motherhood. And honestly, it really goes down to boundaries. But something else that we talked about today, depending on how invested you are in that relationship, another avenue is communicating that you have been hurt. That's not something we like to do a lot. We tend to like to just keep it and move on. Just keep it, keep your boundaries, have your distance and move on. But if that relationship is important to you, it's important that you communicate that you have been hurt.
And also that means communicating, even in our non-romantic relationships. Not all solutions may always be about distance, right? And I think sometimes just the ability to talk through issues can actually make the difference between with bridging the gap. Most of the other questions are similar, but I see a hand there in the audience, and I'm wondering whether we could please give her a mic. Just on this side of the room, there's a lady's hand here. Do you want to stand so they can see you for a mic?
Thank you so much. I'm trying to put myself together so I can ask you this question. So I'm a mental health therapist, right? So to give you a background story about myself so that you can advise on what you think I should do. So I was raped as a child at 8. I suffered domestic abuse in my previous marriage, and I'm currently happily married, But even though I have tried all the mental health therapy that I know by the books, I still have flashbacks that are currently affecting me in my marriage. My husband is very, very supportive. And one of the major flashbacks I have is nightmares on what has happened. And unfortunately, from the rape incidents to the domestic violence I suffered in my previous marriage, and it has resulted to so many things. It has resulted to me having insomnia. I've had to slip into depression. And 2 months ago, I attempted suicide because it was as though I'm trying. So I see clients, people come to me for mental health therapy, and they get results, they get testimonials, but I use the same thing on myself and it's not working. So I don't know why I had this boldness to talk to you openly, to tell you how vulnerable I am, and to see if there's any other thing I have not done that can help me. Thank you.
Fantastic. First of all, can I just celebrate you for having the courage and the boldness to stand up and ask that question. God bless you. So Dr. Toby, very quickly.
I'm just mindful people are coming in. If you have a couple of minutes after this, can we speak one-on-one and we can talk a bit more about it?
Fantastic, ladies. It's been awesome. A round of applause for Dr. Toby and, of course, Mrs. Aoshika, who couldn't stay with us for so long.